Okay, let's take a look here at prep test 87, section 1, questions 11 through 17. And we're informed that we're going to have 4 consecutive weeks. The gallery is going to show 3 oil and 3 watercolors. Each painting will be shown in at least 1 week, with exactly 1 oil painting and 1 watercolor painting shown per week. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to have to assign the oil or the watercolor to the given week. And of course, we have to order the weeks. So let me start off here by, we have the oil paintings, and the oil paintings are GH and I. And we have waters over here, and the watercolor are P, R, and S. All right, got that. And we can draw it. So we know it's going to be over 4 weeks. So here's week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. All right. And I don't know how many lines I want to draw, but that's my start. Get my constraints down at the bottom. And the first constraint is that no painting appears in consecutive weeks. So we'll just have that like that. That's pretty straightforward. The second is that the gold, which is the gold oil, cannot be with the P water. So the gold oil is not with the P water. And I'm going to organize this so that it's always oil water in each of the weeks. So the oil's on the left, the watercolor is going to be on the right. Okay. So I have now constraint on G and P. So we're just starting to develop the law. All right. Next is H, and H is a oil. The H oil must be shown. The H oil must be shown in any week in which the S water is shown. So that's actually saying that when the S water is shown, the H oil has to be shown. So you just want to be careful. Again, it's reading textually. You just want to be careful with that. That's not saying that the S has to be shown with the H. They're saying that the H has to be shown with the S. So anytime you see the S, you have to see the H. You can see the H without seeing the S. But if there is no H, there can be no S. So again, just want to be careful with that. And then my final constraint here is that, H cannot be earlier than 3rd. So I think a more down-to-earth way of saying that is that H cannot be 1st or 2nd. And here's the condition: unless I is shown 1st. So I can write that. And that's a constraint that I don't recall seeing before. And when I don't recall seeing a constraint before, I'm going to pay attention. Well, I'm going to pay attention to all of them. But here, I think this is probably going to play a major role in this. So H cannot be 1 or 2. This is, again, my language. You wouldn't have to write it this way. H cannot be 1st or 2nd. That's not going to happen. Unless, so there is one condition, right? Unless I is 1. Unless I, and they're both oils. All right. Okay, so I want to think about this last one because, if you find that you can answer these questions without creating a law, well, have at it. But if you find that you really can't answer these questions without having a law, well, then you build one. Not that big a deal. So this final constraint tells me a lot. It tells me that H can never be 1, right? Because if you're saying H can be 1 or 2 only if, or unless I is 1, well, then I would be 1. which means H could be 2, right? But H could be 2 only when I is 1. So there are 3 possibilities for H. H is either 2, 3, or 4. So I'm going to trifurcate on that. And remember, once I set where the H is, I'm going to be able to establish where the H cannot be, right? Because the H cannot be consecutive to itself. All right. So I think in terms of the organization of this, pretty straightforward. Although you have to make that deduction from that constraint, which perhaps is not straightforward. So H is here, here, or here. Those are my 3 hypotheticals. H is either 2, 3, or 4. And now I'm going to work. And, there's no one way to do this. For me, I'm going to say, well, you know what? If H is 2, I is 1. That's the only condition under which H is permitted to be 1 or 2. And in these other 2 hypotheticals, I have H out at 3 and 4. So H is not going to be ever at 1. So this can't be H. Ouch. And this can't be H. That's not possible. Okay. H can never be next to itself. So H in the top hypothetical cannot be in week 3. In the middle hypothetical, whoops, changed colors on me there. In the middle hypothetical, H is not going to be 2 and H is not going to be 4. And the bottom hypothetical, H is not going to be 3. The only way H could be 2 in the bottom hypothetical is if I were 1, which is possible. So that's the H, but now I'm looking over it so I've applied the 4th constraint and the 1st constraint. And now I'm thinking about, well, wait a minute. Again, just looking at the law itself, the 3rd constraint informs me that S must be accompanied. For S to be there, H has to be there, all right? So if H is absent, S is absent, right? Because it's H has to appear in any week that S appears in. So if H is not appearing, neither is S. So now look at this. That means S cannot be here. S cannot be here. S cannot be here. Any place where H is absent, S is absent. A lot of absences. Okay. So now, now my eye is, I'm looking at this middle hypothetical where H only goes once. And wherever S appears, H appears, and S has to appear. So in this middle hypothetical, this has to be S, because S can't be there with anybody else. So I'm ready to go on this. I look back at it in this last constraint here, H and I. There are no constraints on the R. Everything I need is in the law in front of me. Just applying what you're doing is these are the constraints that are applied to this law. And that's really all there is to it. There's nothing external. So let's see what we have here. The first is going to be that orientation question. And just be careful with the orientation question. It's which one of the following could be the schedule of paintings shown in the 4 weeks listed in order from week 1 to week 4. Okay. And you're just going one at a time, so you say, okay, how about, did they do anybody consecutive? And again, this is just careful reading. A is okay. B is okay. C is okay. And D is okay. And E is not, right? Because E's got Hancock in the 2nd and 3rd week. So E goes out. Now I come to G and P cannot be together. Okay, so let's not make sure we don't put them together. And A is okay. B is. I'm just looking for the G, and then, you know, if there's no P there, it's not a problem. Okay, C, I'm looking for G, and there's no P, so that's fine. And D, I'm looking for the G, and there's the P. So D is out on week 3. Now I'm looking at wherever I have an S, I gotta have an H. So I'm looking there at A, and I'm okay. And I'm looking at B, and I'm not okay. The S is bringing an I with it. And but you're fine on C. So now we're down to A and C. And the final constraint is, you know, H cannot be 1 or 2 unless I is 1. And in A, H is 2. I is not 1. So the answer to the orientation question is C. And always keep in mind that even if you didn't want to work this hypothetical, you could simply do the orientation question. Question number 12. If S is in the 2nd week, any of the following could be in the 3rd week except. Okay. So again, imagine that what I have on the whiteboard is what you would have on your scrap paper. And further imagine this would be in pen, right? And that as you take information from the individual questions, you put it in pencil, and then you erase what you've written when you're done. So what that would allow me to do here is say, okay, well, if you want S in week 2, you can only be on the top of the bottom hypothetical. And of course, if you want S in week 2, sorry about that. It's not there. If you want S in week 2, you'd have to have H over here in the bottom hypothetical in week 1. And I look at week 3 and you say, who can't you have? Well, you can't have H or S. So now I'm just looking for an answer choice that says that. And sure enough, B says H. So the answer to question number 12 is B. And that's, again, you're being rewarded for developing the law. So erase that. We go to question number 13, which you find must be false. And all you can do here is, you know, let them lead you. A, must it be false that S is in the 1st week? And the answer is, yeah, that's got to be false. And that's the answer. And you get out of there. I assure you, that's the answer. And that is the return on investment for having a law. So let's go to 14. Now, 14, they want gold in the 1st week, and they want to know what could be true. So, okay, there are 2 possibilities here. So you have to work them, unless you can just see it. But the thing we now know about gold is, you know, S is not available in a lot of places, and G can't be with P. So there's going to be a strong relationship between G and R. You know, so if I put G here, if I put G, they want in the 1st week. So 2 possibilities, G here, G here. And that means G is going to have to be with the R because the S is not available and it can't be with the P. If I just filed this second, the middle hypothetical with the G in the 1st week and H not available in the 2nd week, this has got to be I. If I'm looking at the watercolor with R 1st week and S unavailable, then this has to be P. And let me just hold that there. Let me go to the bottom one. And now we have G and R. So with respect to the oil in week 2, you might say, well, it could be H or I. But in fact, it can't be H, right? Because for H to be there, I would have had to have been 1. So this is going to be I. And then you might have a similar conversation over here. You know, well, you can't, or you wouldn't, because you can't have S and you can't have R. So this is going to be P. And then if I just want to continue this out to the 3rd week, I can't have I and I can't have H, and therefore I must have G. And if I'm going to have G, then I'm going to have R. And I'm ready. Okay. So which of the following could be true? Could I be in the 3rd week? No. Could P be in the 3rd week? No. Could R be in the 2nd week? No. Could R be in the 4th week? Well, I haven't gone that far out, but it sure looks like. I mean, there are no restraints on R as a watercolor. So let me look at E. If I have to do more work, I will, but I'm guessing that E is going to just get eliminated. And E says that S is in the 2nd week, and that's not possible. So the answer to question number 14 is D for Drusus. And you just, if you were going to do this hypothetical in the context of most test takers on this test, you'd be doing the first, the second, and the third. And you would set aside additional time for this third hypothetical because it does strike me as more involved. Okay, question number 15. And 15 is, this is death, right? This is the schedule of paintings shown in the 4 weeks is completely determined if which one of the following is true. So if ever you're going to have a strategy that's going to involve conscious guessing, this is the issue you would guess on. And if you're not going to do that, then I would urge you to go, well, urge is too strong. What I would do is go AE. And I really can't tell you why, other than this is the issue itself. The form of that issue is a level 5. It's designed for failure. And anecdotally, my experience informs me that on these type of questions, A or E is the answer more than 40% of the time. So we'll see. So, to completely determine it, I just put it in and I get the same result everywhere. So if G is shown twice, that's what A wants me to G is shown twice. So it can't be in the top hypothetical, right? Because they'd be next to each other. So on the bottom hypo, I can do G twice. Remember, there's a strong relationship between G and R now, right? But if I do here, G, and you need to put the other G over here. You could put the G in week 2. But okay, here's G, and this one would be required G. So that's my 2 G's, all right? And the G here is going to bring the R, and the G here is going to bring the R, right? Because you can't have S and P is not an option. And again, over here, the G is going to bring the R, and G is going to bring the R. Okay, so in terms of the oil, I have the G and the H, but I don't have the I, right? So this fourth one would have to be the I. And that's true down here as well, right? I have the G and the H, so the fourth one would have to be the I. And if I just complete this one watercolor, see how I have the R and the S, I got 2 R's and 1 S, so this would have to be a P. And with respect to the bottom hypothetical, we have here, and we have the R, so we have to distribute in the watercolor a P and an S. If you have the S, you got to have the H, right? So the S is going to be over here, and that's going to leave you over here with the P. And lo and behold, you don't have the same situation. So, I mean, this is just, it's really time consuming. It's destined for failure. But I now know that A is not the answer. So off I go on my journey to purgatory here. Okay, so I would skip down to E. And so I'm going to do that because that's what I would do. And E says, what about if S is shown twice? Okay, so what do I know about S being shown twice? Well, I know it's not in this middle hypothetical, right? Because you can't get S. S can only go once in week 3. And here, the top hypothetical, this would have to be S, and this would have to be S. That's also true. So that's a good start, right? That the S's themselves at least line up. And now I'm looking at, okay, but what comes next? Well, we have, if I go to the top hypothetical, with the S there, I've got a P and an R, right? And I know the P cannot be with the G. So if I'm looking at the P and the R here on my, I'm sorry, this is on the watercolors. If you just put them in, because that's what's available to me, P and R, right? P and R. Oops, P and R, not R, P and R. All right, look at this. So this is P here, P and R. Okay. Now, again, I know wherever I have the S, I've got to get the H. All right, so the H is coming in here. The H is coming in here. And now, I'm looking here at what's available to me. And it's with the H, and the I, in terms of the oils, right? This has to be a G. And so this G needs to be with the R. That means this I is going to have to be with the P, right? So we see if we can make that a little bit clearer. But once we put the H's in there, you have H, H, I. So that has to be G. As we pointed out before, the G has to be with the R. So the R is no longer available over here. And that I is going to have to be with a P. So we have in the top hypothetical, that's what we have. We come down to the bottom hypothetical, and the question is, do you get the same outcome, right? So here, we have, on the watercolors, we still have the P and the R, right? So if we put the P and the R here, then we put the P and the R here. Now on the bottom, in order for H to be 2, I has to be 1, right? And then we're in the same situation because now in the oils, I have I and H, so I need G. And that G is going to require that R. And therefore that R is unavailable for the I, and it becomes IP. And so we have two separate hypotheticals where the middle one's unavailable with identical outcomes. So the answer to question 15 is E. And it's just too painful for words. So unless you're very, very gifted, just say no to that issue when it appears, and it will appear. All right. Oops. Didn't want to erase my H. Okay. All right. So the question, the answer to question 15 is E for Euphrates. Question number 16. All right. So 16 is, if R is shown in weeks 2 and week 4, you say, oh, crap. Yeah. It's just this is all available here. You get R, 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 and R. Okay, so we have R's in there. All right, so what do you want to know? You want to know what could be true. So again, I'm not looking at the answer choices. I'm working by applying the law. And here, my eye kind of goes to the implications of week 3 on watercolors, right? Because week 3, you can't have the S and you can't have the R. So week 3, the watercolors on the top and the bottom have to be P. Okay. And now I have, in terms, again, staying with the watercolors, I have the R and the P accounted for, which leaves the S. And that would force the S on the top and the bottom. It would force the S here. All right. And that can't happen. So they've eliminated the top and the bottom hypotheticals. And now we're left to deal with this middle one. So when they say to you, if the R was scheduled for week 2 and week 4, they're saying, and that would be impossible in the top and the bottom, and therefore you're operating only on this middle hypothetical. Okay. And so then let me finish this out. If, again, when I look at the watercolors, I have the R and ES, the weak one's going to have to be a P. Got that. And now when I turn my attention to the oil paintings, well, I have the H, so I need a G and an I, right? And I know that with respect to the P, right, you're not going to get a G, right? Yeah, good. And you're not going to get an H, so you have to get an I, which now tells me that with respect to weak 2 oil, you can't have an I and you can't have an H, so you have a G. And then you'd be bringing me over here to the final week, and so there's no H available there. We're talking now about the oil painting, and there's no H. So you have the possibility here of an I and a G. And since this said what could be true, I'm suspecting that's the answer, because basically everything else must be true. They narrowed you down to one hypothetical, and they allowed you to fill in 78 positions. So which one of the following could be true? A, gold is the first week. No. B, H is the second week. No. C, H is the fourth week. No. D, I is the second week. No. E, I is the fourth week. Yes, that's the answer. So we have that. Now we have one more, and then we're done. Okay. And 17. And 17, in case you haven't had enough abuse and punishment, 17 is going to, again, present an issue that is an issue from hell. So again, for me, it's going to be AE, but I need to get there. And what do we got here? Which one of the following, if substituted for the condition that G cannot be shown in any week in which P is shown? So they're directing me here. G cannot be with P, would have the same effect. So, I certainly don't want to redraw this whole thing. And I'm just going to say, all right, what this requires is that G and P never be together. So they've got to give me something that accomplishes the same outcome with different language. Okay. A, R must be shown in any week in which G is shown. So that would be if G, then R. So that would mean, it's identical to that, right? Because if you can say if G, then R, well, G can't, in other words, once you place G, it has to be accompanied by R, which would mean it could never be accompanied by P, because G requires R. So A is the answer, and you got to pick it and get out of there, because it's a very challenging hypothetical. So that's how we would answer questions 11 through 17 in Prep Test 87.